Afternoon, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy Friday. Happy 12 o'clock. Yes, I thought we would have a little discussion. We're going to be discussing, actually, for those who are sticking for the long term, we're going to be discussing Labour all afternoon because I'm going to be talking about one aspect of Labour's strategy specifically against the far right, what it should be, what it is. And then Graham on his stream at 1 o'clock wants to talk about, what would we say now? Why Starmer and Reeves are so hated, but that's for later. For now. So I'm referring here to an article, an opinion piece that's been written in The Guardian by Chris Powell. Chris Powell is the brother of Jonathan Powell, who is one of Starmer's senior advisors. But Chris Powell also has pedigree of his own. He was a strategist under the last Labour government. You know, that was the Labour government that understood political strategy. So he's someone worth listening to. And I'm going to go down the article. I'm just going to go through it. I've put a link in the description below, I think. Pretty sure I have. Should have done anyway. And there's a couple of articles written about it. The Guardian have written their own article about his article, but I'm going to go through this article. And I want to just go through this because I do want to point out the nub of what he's saying is that Labour at the moment, Starmer doesn't have a clear, coherent plan for taking on Reform UK. Now, I am going to suggest there is, by the way, good reason for that. Because there was a plan. There was a plan. And it sort of fell apart. And it didn't fall apart because it was a bad plan. It fell apart because of circumstances that a lot of people were not predicting, myself included. So I'm certainly not going to throw stones. But he is also correct to say that the plan isn't there right now. The effective plan isn't there right now, and there needs to be one, and there is one on offer. I'll just cover this from Bruce first of all, saying, Phil, following from the last live, is the Home Secretary making a mistake to say she'll robustly defend the decision to strip Samina Begum of her British citizenship? Probably not. If we get time for this later, I will. I suspect we won't. I was actually reading something about that from Joshua Rosenberg, who is a legal expert. So although I can't find it now, I can't remember when I was reading it. But although it was wrong to remove her citizenship in the first place, the government have clearly failed. It's one of those things now that you're basically stuck on from a legal point of view. From a legal point, I mean, I might be able to go over it later. Can I link it to you? That would be even better. Oh no, it's in a Substack. But Joshua Rosenberg has written something about it which explains the legal situation. So probably the government's taken the only position it now can. But anyway, on to this article, which I wanted to go through. So I'll read it through and I'm going to add my thoughts as we go through. So Chris Powell, so remember he was part of the New Labour project. He was a strategist. He wasn't MP, he was a strategist. So he starts by saying, there is much to learn from the New Labour playbook. We were disciplined, innovative, robust and proactive, and we won. The we won bit is by far the most important, right? Then he starts, the next general election will be no ordinary democratic contest, not the usual swing of the pendulum this way or that. It will be a key moment in the history of our democracy, and it could be less than 3 years away. In reality, that's probably unlikely because it'll be just over 3 years away, because at the end of the day, if Labour are on for a hiding, they will not have the election before, certainly not before April 2029. There'd be absolutely no reason to have it before April 2029 if Labour were on for a hiding. Then it says, be in no doubt, populists represent a new and terrifying threat to the kind of free elections and free society we cherish but now take for granted. And I'm going to say I 100% agree on that. Populists all over the place. Populists all over the place have no respect for democracy. Populism is not about unity. It's not about society. It's about tribes. It's always about tribes. And it doesn't matter. We've seen throughout history, we've seen it in the world today. It's not about left or right. We talk about the particular threat being from the far right in this country, but around the world and throughout history, we've had left and right populist groups who strip away democratic norms wherever they are. So populism is a threat to democracy, certainly, because populism never delivers, ever. Whenever it's tried, it never delivers. So the only way it can stay in power is by reducing your democratic rights. So anyway, it carries on. As Donald Trump declared a pre-election rally in July 2024, we've all heard this before, in quote, "In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have fixed it so good, you're not going to have to vote." And that's a direct quote from Donald Trump. We remember that from 2020. I keep saying last year, it's now the year before, 2024, where Donald Trump wasn't just saying that you won't have to vote for him again, because we knew they weren't going to have to vote for him again. It would be his last term. He was going to say you're not going to have to vote at all, right? So he was going to remove democracy. Or as his fellow populist Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Turkish president, said, "Democracy is like a tram. You ride it until you arrive at your destination, then you step off." And again, we've seen this in history, haven't we? Where dictators use democracy to get power and then they remove democracy, right? And then he says, "Yet here in the UK, where is the urgently needed counter plan on a huge scale to thwart and head off such an existential threat? It's simply not in place, nor does it appear to even be at the planning stage." Now I'm going to stop there, and I will say there is good reason why the plan is in the early stages now, and that is because it's not that to be fair, Labour's plan for far-right populism was, and Starmer made this clear in 2024, and I fully backed it up. He said the plan is to make people's lives better. And absolutely, at the time, that was the plan, and that was the only plan you could have. Remember, if we go back, let's think about this strategically. So Labour, Keir Starmer takes over Labour in 2020, right? Just under 6 years ago now it would be, I suppose. So at that point, his first job is to reorganise the Labour Party itself, right? The actual party, but also you've got COVID going on. So there's not a lot emerging about what sort of government Keir Starmer's offering to the people. But that's okay, because you've got COVID going on, you've got Brexit going on, and the first thing he needed to do was to fix the foundations of the Labour Party itself, right? 2021, they have a real low point. They lose the Hartlepool by-election, even though that was basically nailed on anyway. But they have a reorganisation, and then they start powering on from there. And that's the point at which 2021 is the point at which that is when they're developing their long-term plans. And they developed over time. Some of them were strengthened, some of them were weakened. But they developed into 2022, 2023, into 2024. Remember, back in 2021, Starmer was talking about getting the party ready for an election in 2023, right? So that's when the long-term planning started. Now, back in 2021, were Reform UK on a trajectory to win power? No. They were nowhere. Back in 2021... when Labour would have started their long-term plans, Reform UK, which remember had just newly formed from the Brexit Party, Reform UK were doing about as well as UKIP in the polls. They were on like 2% or something. They were nowhere. It was during 2021 they started to grow a little bit on the back of the small boats crisis, which the Tories engineered and provoked, right? So back in 2021, did Labour need a plan to deal with the threat of a Reform UK government? No. Reform UK were nowhere. So then you think 2022. In 2022, did Labour need a plan to deal with Reform UK? Reform UK were growing at this point. No, Reform UK just represented a problem to the Conservative Party. It was hiving off votes from the Conservative Party. It was a brilliant thing. It was brilliant for Labour because it was just making the Tories become increasingly unelectable. And then after Liz Truss, that was it. It was curtains for the Tories. But Reform UK still didn't represent a threat. 2023, did they represent a threat? No. Even in 2024, even in the election itself, Reform UK got a huge number of votes. That's worrying, right? Got like 14%, something like that, wasn't it? But they went into that election looking like they might have been able to win a dozen seats, including some key Labour seats, such as in Barnsley. They were after a couple of Barnsley seats. Didn't get them. They got 5 seats. One of them was a very close, required a recount, so it was very, very tight. 5 seats. Were Reform UK a credible threat to Labour at that point? No. So at no point up to and including at the general election would you have, and I don't know if anyone has come across anyone where anyone said back in the past they would have been a threat. I certainly didn't regard them as a threat, and I didn't see anyone regarding Reform UK as a threat to Labour up until that point. Then, of course, after the election, in the first few weeks after the election, it's all going brilliantly. Keir Starmer's talking very positively. There's lots of positive action going on. They delay the summer recess to get started. It all looks very businesslike, brilliant. We've finally got a serious government. They go up in the polls. Keir Starmer's more popular. The Labour Party's more popular, going great guns. Then you have the riots. That knocks them off their stride. Then they deal with that. They come back after the riots. They don't really get any credit for that, but they don't get the blame for it either. But after it, they then decide to go into, oh yeah, the economy's shite. Oh, it's even more shite than we thought. Yeah, it's going to be really tough to fix. Their strategy then, not for the far right, their strategy for this dealing with the cost of living was trying to persuade the public that things would get better before they get worse, and that would be okay. That their strategy was that the public would accept that things will get better to begin with. They'll get worse to begin with and then get better. The public didn't buy that. They didn't want that. So then Reform UK start to surge. You wouldn't have expected it. At that point, Labour's plan, remember, Labour's plan to deal with the far right, make people's standard of living better. And that is still the core way you deal with populism. You use established politics, mainstream politics, to make people's lives better. And then there's no need for populism then. People won't vote for populists then. The problem is that Labour's making people's lives better plan was a 10-year plan, not a 5-year plan. That's where it went wrong. So I am going to say, I don't think, I'm not suggesting that they are criticising Labour for not having had a plan a long time ago, but I am going to say there is good reason for Labour to now be in need of a new plan, because I'm going to suggest circumstances have changed in a way that people didn't predict. John saying, I hope Orban gets kicked out this year. It'll be very, very difficult. Yeah, at the moment, if you look at the independent polling, he should get kicked out. However, Trump has already said he's going to interfere in the elections. We know he interfered in the Argentine elections last year, and he got his way against the run of polling at the time. So yeah, I think Hungary is going to be a bad one. The investigation into political funding has been strategically convened to report in April, just before the elections. I think it's strategically so that I don't think it's directly to do with the elections, although that might be a byproduct of it. I think it's because they want to get the elections bill. They're now in a rush to do the elections bill, but they've got to make sure they get it right. I mean, Farage has already taken receipt of 9 million quid from a single donor, right? Nigel Farage is now talking, I want to look something up actually. He's now talking about spending 5 million quid in the elections next year. 5 million quid for 2 parliamentary elections, devolved parliamentary elections and some local elections. And I'm just going to look something up. So that's he's basically going to spend as much on the elections next year as they spent on the general election campaign. That's how much more flush with funds they are. See, I think Reform did come second in 90 plus Labour seats. Second is no place. I'm sorry to quote Crease from The Karate Kid, but second place is no place. Really, in a first past the post system, second is not. You can keep them in second place. It's not a problem. As far as Labour are concerned, were they first? Yes. Again, right up until the end of 2024, right up until like autumn, I would say 2024, Reform UK for Labour, as far as Labour were concerned, Reform UK simply represented something that stops the Conservatives winning. So there was, and I said at the time, I did actually caution at the time there was a bit of a danger in viewing Reform UK as a beneficial political force, when of course we know that even when it's not winning, it is shifting the Overton window, not in a place I would like. So yeah, it's but the fact of the matter is that Reform UK are now a threat, a serious threat to Labour, to everyone, and there needs to be a plan. And what Chris is saying here, they don't seem to have that plan. But we'll read in terms of what he wants. So he says, the longer they go unchallenged, the more unthreatening and risk-free they will seem to voters. That is a really important point. It's the point I've said myself. We understand the danger of normalising certain... We've normalised certain ideas. There are certain things that people are saying now in mainstream politics, not even just Reform UK, but the Conservatives, even in Labour a little bit, which you would not have said 10 years ago, would have been completely beyond the pale 10 years ago. On social justice, for example, in particular. And so basically, there's certain things been normalised now. And what he's talking about here is the very concept of Reform UK becoming normalised being a real danger, and it is. And that's where there is a sense in which there is a time element to this, because it's not just a case of, which it was probably a year ago when Reform UK started to get ahead in the polls. You would have said at the time, but if Labour show this, and I did say at the time, if Labour show that they're making people's lives better, then that'll turn that back. But there is a danger in allowing Reform UK to be seen as a credible form of government. Because once you allow that idea, and this is why I've now said for the last half a year, the next government, whenever it is, the next government is going to be a Reform UK government. And that, it could be a majority Reform UK government. It could be a Reform UK government supported by the Conservative Party. It could be a merger of Reform UK and the Conservative Party. It will still be a Reform UK government. Because even if Reform and the Conservatives merge, which is not an imminent concept, but it could happen, happened in Canada. If you look at that, it will be Reform UK. It will be Reform UK. It will be a hostile takeover. I mean, Farage has described what he's doing as a reverse takeover of the Conservative Party. And that is what I see happening. He says, just hoping that Reform and Farage implode or that the right-wing vote will somehow fracture is potentially suicidal for our freedom and democracy. And again, I'll say the same thing. I know some people have got excited about the fact that Reform suffered quite a big drop in the poll relative, that the lead was cut in half within a week last month. But as I said myself, there's two sides to this. First is, yes, Reform UK have done some things recently that has made them less popular, and they've suffered in the polls. But you need the driving force from Labour and the Conservatives to actually, if you're going to see Reform UK's polling properly collapse, you need both Labour and the Conservatives, quite frankly. But the focus here has to be Labour. Labour have to do something to drive themselves up in the polls, and they're not. They're not. That's the problem. They're not doing anything. They're saying now, you're going to see the benefits of what we did in the first 1.5 years in 2026, right? I'm going to say, I'm not sure. I've said before, I think people will see quite a bit of stuff in 2027. There are some things that will be showing them, proving themselves in 2026, but you've got to point it out. I think the stuff that's coming online in 2026 is the sort of stuff that people will consider popular. They'll approve of it. But I also think you have to point it out. I don't think they're going to just notice it themselves. So, yes, without that comm strategy, I do think Labour are just sort of hoping. But again, the people who are sort of, you know, delighting in that Reform UK poll collapse last month, don't imagine that it's part of momentum. Don't imagine it's going to carry on. There's nothing making it carry on. There's nothing making it carry on. The only way it will carry on is if Labour and the Conservatives do that. Bloody hell, Phil, I've never heard you say that before. I simply could not live with that outcome. Sorry, is that Reform UK government? I've been saying that consistently for the last half a year because it is. The state of politics now is such, right? Labour at some point have to lose, right? There's a danger they lose at the next election. I'm not saying that I think that's likely yet. There's still quite a lot of things they've got in their locker that are coming online. And there are things that they can do to improve their comms, which they can do at any time once they realise they need to. But at some point, they're going to lose. They can't stay in power forever. The last Labour government thought they could stay in power forever. That was how delusional they were. And yet they had more reason to do so because they were a much more effective campaigning machine. This Labour government is a bad campaigning machine. In government, it was quite good in opposition for like 2 years. 2 full years, I would say it was spot on. The wheels fell off towards the end. But in government, they've been atrocious. Absolutely atrocious. They thought to themselves, once they're in government, they've got... Because they thought to themselves, the Conservatives aren't coming back straight away. So they thought, 10 years, right? We'll win the next election. 10 years. Good. Job's a good one. No, that's all fallen apart now. So it could be at the next election. But even if it's not, even if Labour win a majority at the next election, the one after, at some point they're going to lose. And when they lose, what I'm saying is the government that replaces them will be a Reform UK government. I see no other alternative. There's no other alternative. Is there any hope for parties like Reform UK and the Tories to lose all relevance in the UK? No. Maybe with the demographic shift? No. Because there's always going to be a right wing in this country. We are actually quite evenly split. We're slightly centre-left, but only very slightly, by and large, in the population. But remember, with the first past the post system, it doesn't matter where the centre of gravity is. It's roughly evenly split. We've got left-wing voters, we've got right-wing voters. The right-wing voters want to vote for a right-wing option. Right? Now, strategically, who are they going to vote for? There are some parts of the country where they can vote for the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats are sort of centre-right and socially liberal. But what if you're very right-wing? The Lib Dems are too lefty for you, right? So you've got the Conservatives and Reform UK. The Conservatives and Reform UK together will always be able to rely on at least a third of the vote. So there is no way that both of them collapse. There is a possibility for the Conservative Party to collapse and Reform UK emerge. There is a possibility for Reform UK to collapse and the Conservatives to retake. I don't see that one, but it's possible. It is possible for them to merge and consolidate the right-wing vote. It is not possible for them both to disappear because you've got a good chunk, a massive chunk of voters that have no other options. So that massive chunk of voters will keep at least one of them alive. The country is not left wing. It's not right wing. It's like most people are somewhere centre left, centre right, round the middle. That's where most people are. It's just at the moment we don't really have parties reflecting that. And the other problem with the Lib Dems as well is they're only competitive in certain parts of the country. There's a few parts of Scotland. There's some parts of England. They're not really an option throughout Britain. Reform UKKK's PLC's biggest problem is the councils they won control of last year. Well, they want to win more next year. I think they're vaguely stupid about that because I think that's a massive problem. I think their councils are a problem for them. Farage may not agree, which is weird because I think they're a huge problem for them. Because the thing is as well, where they win councils is where they're naturally strongest. So it's, in other words, where they're winning the councils, that's where they're targeting for their MPs at the next election. But the locals, I mean, you can hide it from the media. The mainstream media can go quiet on a lot of the chaos in the councils. You can't hide it from the people living there. Will Trump potentially backtrack on his immigration strategy? Could the UK public's view of immigration change as well and therefore blunt reforms rise? So I don't think Donald Trump has shown signs of change in tack unless he's forced to. I would like to think that the British public will look at what's happening in America over the next few years and in their risk-reward calculation in their head, see Reform UK as a greater risk. But you still need Labour to, in the risk-reward calculation, Labour, they're not really presenting a huge risk to people, I don't think, to be fair. But they do need to enhance the reward side of their offer, which at the moment people just don't see the reward, even though I can point out things that have already improved. If people don't feel it, if people don't believe it, and they're fed, remember, a constant diet of the media telling them that they're getting this wrong and they're just dishonest about this and this is all terrible, and you know that Labour are not fighting back against it. I mean, I'm going to be talking about that in Graham's stream, I think at 1 o'clock. You mean like in a generation or two? Yeah, we've got to get to a generation or two first. We've got to, like, the way I look at it is this. If you look at Brexit, we've already done one thing that Nigel Farage wanted. We've already effectively voted for him, right? We voted for Brexit and then the hard Brexit. I've got an Epstein-themed video on that later today. The second video for today. But both of them are on Farage today, actually. My videos today, interestingly. Not mentioning Trump. I'm not really mentioning. I've actually slightly mentioned Trump in the first. But anyway, never mind that. So if you look at Brexit and you look at the damage that Brexit's done, and we're only slowly reversing it. I mean, I believe I'm going to see the day when we rejoin the EU. Okay, I've got to survive. I don't know when I'm going to die, right? I've not got a death clock. But I think there's a decent chance, if I live to be an average age, I will live to see us rejoin the EU. But I don't think we'll rejoin the EU in the next few years. I think it's a way off. I was hoping it could be done within 10 years. That's not happening now. But it's going to happen. But it's going to take a long time. So then you think about the damage that a Reform UK government could do. It could be worse. It could be worse than Brexit. Again, like, you can't have a new government come in and reverse it. If you look at the damage Trump is doing in America. So let's say everything goes well from now on for America. Let's say the midterms are bruising for the Republicans. The Democrats regain control of Congress. Then let's say the following presidential election, the Democrats win. Trump tries to cling on to power, but he can't, right? So there's a transition of power. It may not be a peaceful transition of power. It wasn't last time, but there will be a transition of power. Democrats are back in control in, when, 2029? Are they just going to scrub away all the damage Trump's done? No, they're stuck with it. They're stuck with it. They'll be stuck with it for possibly a generation or two. So the damage that could be done could be permanent. Remember, we're still suffering the damage done by Thatcher in this country. There's damage that Thatcher did to this country we still haven't recovered from. So, yeah, I don't think we can just think, well, if a Reform UK government happens, we'll just have to try and get through it and then look to brighter pastures in the future. I do believe that Reform UK will become about as popular as a fart in a broken lift if they win power. But we also have to worry about what Chris Powell is worrying about here, in that we are... the damage that could be done is not necessarily fixable quickly. And if you think about it, if a new government does come in, let's say he can't actually strip away democracy, because we do have some checks and balances, then that government's first priority is not going to be fixing the constitutional damage. It's going to be dealing with the cost of living crisis, because there will continue to be a cost of living crisis, just like there is in America. Trump is making the cost of living crisis worse, not better. Farage will do the same. And I really don't think both parties need to realise that there's just 8 reform policies just help reform in the end. It will, but I'm also going to say, I'm going to kick back on the idea that Labour are aping reform policies. They're not aping any reform policies. They are aping some of their rhetoric on one policy area, which is also unhelpful, but there's no policies in common with them. The Conservatives, however, are copying their policies, and that is not helping the Conservatives either. The problem is they think it is, because Kemi Badenoch thinks, oh, we've gained in the polls recently, therefore my plan to basically ape Reform UK and be a more credible version of them is working. But it's not. What she's not recognising is that Conservative polling is still down on where it was when she took over as leader. So, yeah, both parties, both Labour and the Conservatives, at the moment are failing on basic political nous. They do not have good political advisors, neither of them. That is a huge problem. That is a problem. See, we didn't even get through all of this, did we? I didn't get onto his plan, but I have put a link in the description below to his to the article. It's all, again, people that are proven strategists are always worth listening to. Always worth listening to. I mean, really, Starmer could do a lot worse than get... And I wouldn't necessarily advocate just getting all the old new Labour strategists in-house, because, you know, it was a different time and they had different objectives and different challenges. But at the end of the day, a proven strategist is a proven strategist, right? And political strategy, the process of it, the process of analysing and coming up with solutions is the same, even when the challenges are different and the times are different. So he could do a lot, Starmer could do a lot worse than to just have a clear out of number 10. And do you know what? If you have to get in a load of old fogies who were doing their stuff at the last time, well, that would be better than they've got now. But anyway. I think we're heading towards a world where elections will move further and further from economic arguments to cultural ones, presaged by both Reform UK and the Gaza Independence. I don't think so. No, I don't agree with that. That's not backed up by polling at the moment. The economy will always be the most important thing. When it comes down to it, that's always the most... People's personal finances is always the top issue, and it is at the moment. It is right now. It's right now in the UK. It's right now in America. What you're describing is the fragmentation of the vote. When you're talking about Reform UK and the Gaza Independence, and now you'd say the Your Party and the Greens, and what that represents is a hiving off of votes for people. But even they, what are they making? What are they making? They're also making... actually, the Your Party are a bit different, so they are making cultural arguments, you would say. But the Green Party aren't. The Green Party are also making economic arguments. Reform UK are making economic arguments. So no, the economic arguments will always win out. People's personal finances will always win out. And the reason for that is because the vast majority of people culturally speaking, are usually fine, because culture warriors don't attack the majority, they attack minorities. I mean, where Trump's going wrong is attacking too many minorities to the point where a bit like in the South Park water park, they've congregated into a, not quite a majority, but a large minority. So no, I all the evidence is that if anything, the economy is more important for people, more important, and that is because, and this is the worst thing about populism for me. It keeps people poor. People being poor means they're more attracted to populism, because the poorer you make people, the more desperate they are, and they're more likely to vote for an extreme option. And then they vote for the extreme option. That extreme option makes them poorer. Because they're poorer, they're more desperate. They vote for the extreme option. And people like Farage and Polanski know that. They know that. It benefits them. Same with Trump. They know that people will vote for the most extreme option. If the more desperate you are, the more extreme the option you will countenance. So it's in their interest to keep you poor. But anyway. What about the Lib Dems? The Lib Dems are just focused on a few parts of the country. The Lib Dems, I mean, I have vocalised the idea that maybe the Lib Dems could spy an opportunity. They'd have to move a bit further to the right to occupy this, because they could occupy the space currently occupied by the Conservative Party. So I did see at one time a future whereby the Liberal Democrats ease into Conservative territory, squeezing the Conservatives between themselves and Reform UK. Then you get a merger, and then you end up with two parties on the right, the Lib Dems, which would be like a moderate Conservative Party. Well, they wouldn't be Conservative Party because they're still socially liberal, but they'd be like a right-wing Liberal Party, and then you'd have a right-wing authoritarian party, which could be tidier in many ways. But the Lib Dems have shown no sign of wanting to do that. So, and it won't happen. It won't just naturally happen. People won't just naturally gravitate towards the Lib Dems. The Lib Dems would have to work on a national, because they'd have to grow out of their current stomping grounds in order to do that. They would have to they'd need a national campaign, and they tend to focus on hyper-local campaigns. So, no, I don't really see it. Oh, poor and poorly educated in terms of ones with populism. Well, again, but that's always the case. That's why Labour and left-wing parties in general, apart from the ones, the democratic ones, should we say, social democrats, should we say, social democrat governments tend to prize education very highly, because there's not just a moral imperative, it also helps them electorally. But anyway. So because we're transitioning to late stage capitalism, give it 50 years of insufficient pushback, we can look forward to Elysium. We might have to look forward to the collapse of civilization before then, Amy. So, no. But anyway, we'll leave it there. I've got to get ready for the other stream on Graham's Politics Social channel. Thanks for coming, everyone. Sorry for the doom and gloom for the first New Year's stream. But I actually do think, I'm going to finish off by saying, I do think 2026 will have some hope. I think MAGA is going to go backwards. I think MAGA is going to struggle. It's still incredibly dangerous. In Britain, there is the potential for some major fight back. We will see what happens. Labour would do themselves a lot of favour. When I say Labour, I don't just mean the Labour leadership. I also mean Labour MPs. Would do themselves some favours in having a serious debate collectively about what to do, because they're running out of time. But there is the potential there. They've got all the elements they need. They just need, like Chris Powell is saying, they need to recognise two things. First of all, that they need a definite plan to counter the far right, and that secondly, they don't currently have one. If they think they have one, they don't. The one they did have has collapsed. And it was understandable. It wasn't a stupid plan. You wouldn't have predicted. No, I didn't see anyone predicting it. I saw no one predicting it. But it's nonetheless, it is what it is. A lot of it, again, it's partly down to Starmer's and his team's political naivety. They never should have allowed the winter fuel allowance policy. They never should have allowed that fatal PIP policy. Things like that did them a lot of damage. That's political naivety. A lot of it is also Trump winning that presidential election, which was out of their hands, but nonetheless, that has caused a material impact as well. You know, so there were things, the circumstances that you wouldn't have predicted, but nonetheless, they are where they are. They need a new plan, and they need it quite quickly. But it is what it is. We'll leave it there for now anyway. Thanks for coming on, everyone. Have a great rest of day, and until next time, I'll see you later.